Welcome to Lifestyle Solopreneur, the community for entrepreneurs who put lifestyle first. Join your host, Flavia Barris, as she interviews successful lifestyle solopreneurs and shares ideas to help you find the perfect balance between lifestyle, business, and self. Flavia is an attorney, marketing expert, and founder of several online academies. She's been featured in major media, including BBC World News, The Wall Street Journal, The New York Post, ESPN Television, and more. Join us for this episode of Lifestyle Solopreneur.
Hey, Lifestyle Solopreneurs. Today we get to speak with Andrew Hartman. He is the founder of Time Boss, an organization that helps leaders and their teams reinvent their relationships with time to get more done with less stress and anxiety. Andrew founded Time Boss after burning out several times, even losing his sense of smell for a season. He has taken all that he has learned over the years to build a system to help business leaders and their teams avoid the same mistakes and chaos and find their highest sustainable pace. Andrew is a fractional COO with over 18 years of experience supporting the launch of software and technology startups. Welcome to the show, Andrew.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. I'm so glad to be here.
It's fabulous to have you here. I love just picking the brain of people like you because you just have so much life experience. You've done so many things. So tell us a little bit, what's your journey like? Like, how did you get to where you are today? What inspired you to found Time Boss? And what does Time Boss do?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Love to share. My background, I started in early stage software companies. I was on the agency side and on the client side. And in that process, found that I was quickly overwhelmed by way too many things to do and not enough time to do it, which I imagine most people that are listening to this podcast are probably in a similar place. Most people feel like there's just too many things to do and not enough time to do it. The challenge was for me, I was a grinder. I wanted to contribute. I wanted to do great work. And I just was overwhelmed by the sheer amount of things coming at me, and I didn't know how to handle it. This led to quite a bit of stress, doing the best I could. We were getting results, but I was just grinding myself down in the process. You mentioned in my bio, I actually did lose my sense of smell for about 6 months because of stress. And I could feel it coming on. This is in the mid 2000s. There was no COVID. Like, this is strictly because of stress. And the body will do really wacky things when you're experiencing a lot of stress or anxiety or just any stress on the body. Sometimes your body will do things just to blink the red flashing lights to say, this needs to be different. I felt it coming on. I'd wake up in the middle of the night stressed out. I'd have Post-it notes by my bed. Try to write things on Post-it notes to get them out of my head so I could go back to sleep. Wake up in the morning with chicken scratch. I just was overwhelmed by what was happening. So that led to, again, losing my sense of smell, a series of burnouts. And ultimately, as you mentioned in my bio, I was a COO for early stage software companies where you just got to deliver. Like, there's no runway. Like, a lot of entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, like, it's on you. There's not a big bench there. And so I wanted to contribute, but I just was so challenged to do that in a way that was sustainable. And I would burn out and I'd see my team burn out, which means sometimes when people burn out, they churn or they change jobs. And what I realized is this is just illogical. This isn't even a logical way for us to get the impact and the contribution that we want. We can't lose people like this. It can't take this toll on me like it's taking, where I'm giving all my life energy to work and there's nothing left over for my family or for my kids or for my community. So I started working on a framework for myself. Truly, I was just trying to solve my own problem of how can I find my highest sustainable pace where I can make the contribution that I want to make, but the cost of it is not anxiety and burnout. And after one just final crazy blowout in 2016, it was the last straw. I finished off the framework, really solved it for myself, started making tremendous impact and contribution to the things I cared about without this drag of anxiety or burnout, just a really sense of peace and focus and clarity. Started using that framework with my teams. They experienced the same. Had other people start to lean in from other companies and say, what the heck are you doing? And can you show me how to do it? And it was this odd side thing that opened up around training and coaching around this time management framework that now I'm doing with Time Boss. So it wasn't what I expected. Probably like a lot of people on this call that are entrepreneurs, this wasn't the career I expected to have, but it's an opportunity that opened up and I just kept riding the horse in the direction it was going. And here we are on a podcast talking about it now.
A lot of people think time, like as an element, is one of the most valuable things that there
Yeah.
is. Honestly, if you think about
Yeah.
life itself is this container of time that you
Right.
have, and that's what you get on this planet. So I really love that you have built a whole career around this valuable element. There's all those like funny movies they do, either like sci-fi or superhero movies where there's like unobtainium, or I guess that's from
Right.
Avatar maybe, but these elements that are like more valuable than anything in the universe, and they discover it. The most valuable thing we've already discovered, right? It's time. And so
100%.
tell us a little bit, like we're all on the edge of our seats. Like, how do you help people with making the most of their time? Is
Yeah.
this something you teach them how to manage their time? Is it more of mindset? Is it how to organize their day? What do you focus on?
The answer is yes. It is all those things. And to affirm what you said, Flavia, time is the currency of our life. Anything we want in life, it will cost time. Even if we're going to spend money on it, even if we're going to go to the mall and buy it, time is the way that we get anything that we want. And so it becomes this thing that I'm just so adamant about people taking ownership of that. And that's the whole idea of Time Boss, even the name itself. It's about you becoming the boss of your future self. You're literally setting up your future self to be successful in the same way that you might empower an employee on your team, because that future version of you has no agency over the decisions you're making right now. So you're really taking a mindset of how do I plan on a week to week basis where Andrew, that's going to show up next week, is set up to crush his work and intensely focus and know what he's doing and know what he's not doing, and making sure that there's realistic buffer built in to deal with the reality of his day and strategies to contend with all the different requests that are going to come at him. So that's what Time Boss is. But I can share just a bit very practically. If you think about whenever you start anything new, any new job, let's say someone decides they want to be an entrepreneur and they have their first day. The first day is probably doesn't feel incredibly stressful. They're probably adding things to their list. They're well under capacity. They've got lots of ideas, but there's enough time in the day for me to get the things done that I need to get done. And it's great. So we tend to start things really strong. What happens is if we don't have a true sense of our capacity, eventually as we're adding things, we add beyond our capacity. And we start planning our days with more things than we can possibly get done. We commit in our head and think, oh, I can get this much done, but that's beyond our capacity. The challenge is then what happens is day over day, we are doing the best we can, but we're finishing each day with a number of things undone. And we're not particularly focused on the things we got done. We're focused on the things that we didn't finish, which creates a narrative in people's heads, right? That's when people start feeling anxiety. That's when they start feeling stress. They start saying these things to themselves like, there's not enough time, or I can't keep up, or I'm overwhelmed, or I'm underwater, or I'm so busy. All these stories that we tell ourselves. And sometimes, especially in entrepreneurship, we've been sold the lie about hustle culture, right? That just grind. That's how you're going to win. You just got to grind. But it doesn't matter. Stress, anxiety is the cost of getting whatever you want. And I just think that over time, people degrade. If you think about it, let's say today you thought you could get 8 things done, but the reality is there's no chance you were ever going to get 8 things done. You could only get 5 things done. Those 3 things you don't get done become your anxiety story. And then you shove them into tomorrow. Those become the first 3 things on your list tomorrow. You plan 8 things again. And again, you were never going to get 8 things done. So day after day, you're telling yourself that you're a failure, and that's ultimately dragging you down. And what people don't realize, they think, oh, I just have to go as fast as I can. I just have to grind. What they don't realize is when they operate that way and they're living within that failure story, what happens is the items that they're actually working on degrade as well. Because as you're focused on whatever task is in front of you, in the back of your head, you're feeling the anchor weight of all the things that you're not getting done. You're feeling the guilt and pressure. Every time you look at your to-do list to tackle the one that's on top, you're looking at the 9 things below it and feeling the weight of not doing those. It's like the children you're not feeding, but creates this real anxiety because you know how important all those items on your list are, but you just can't get to them. And so again, it is mental models and it is also habits. It's both of those things. And what I'm really encouraging people to do as an alternative is to almost zero base their time in the same way they might zero base their financial budget. If you're spending way more money than you have, the logical thing to do is to take everything off the table and build your budget back to where you can live within your means. with a reasonable buffer. And time's no different. So first move is decide how much of my life do I want to give to this? If you're an entrepreneur, do I want to give 40 hours to this? Do I want to give 80 hours to this? Do I want to give 20 hours to this? It's really up to you. And I actually have no bearing. There will be people that I work with in Time Boss that work 80 hours a week and their heart is on fire and they're doing the best work of their life, not burning out. And there's people that go through Time Boss that work 20 hours a week in a part-time role or a side hustle, and they are grinding themselves to a pulp in 20 hours a week. So time, the amount of time, actually has no bearing on people's lives. It's how they navigate that time that matters. So let me pause. I can definitely fill in once you know what your capacity is, what you do next. But I don't want to talk over you, Flavia. If you have any questions that I can answer up at this point, or I'm happy to keep rolling.
Yeah, I know it's super interesting. Go ahead and keep rolling because my eyes are wide open. I'm like, tell me more. I think this is really
Okay,
interesting to hear.
awesome. So once you have your capacity, let's say we'll just go with 50 hours a week is about the average of what a knowledge worker entrepreneur is giving to that area of their life. Again, we have agency, we decide. Life is not happening to us. We're choosing, to your point, it's this time is this finite currency. And because it's finite, it's so incredibly valuable. We're deciding how much life we're giving to it. So for me, I give 50 hours a week to what I would call income generating activities, meaning Time Boss or my fractional COO work or whatever I'm working on. So that 50 hours is now my inventory. That is, or currency. That's the only currency I have. And now I am like a portfolio manager for that currency to decide how should I spend that time. So again, taking that zero-based approach, I'm getting everything out of my head into a single list because the reality is anything within those 50 hours competes. I can't do everything. I'm finite. So I need to understand what are all the things. So I'm getting everything to a single list. And then once everything's in a single list, I'm stack ranking them in priority because at 8 a.m. on Monday, let's say when I start work, I can only truly do one thing at a time. Multi-focusing is a total lie. I'm happy to go into the science of it. We can argue with, there's probably people listening to this podcast are like, I can do 10 things at a time. You're kidding yourself. And I'm happy to get into the science of it. It's not possible to bring your best work to a thing when you're focusing on 10 things at a time. So based off that premise, you can only do one thing at a time. So at 8 o'clock on Monday, I'm simply saying prior to the beginning of your work week, once everything's in a list, you're doing the stack ranking to decide what is the most important task here. You're not punting to your future self to figure it out real time when they show up at 8 a.m. You're doing that work on the front end in a very sober moment to prioritize your list. Once your list is prioritized, you're then taking those items on your list and you're breaking them down into manageable chunks. You're breaking them down into 1 to 4 hour tasks that you're going to be able to map to your calendar. And the key here is you want to clearly define done. You want to know with intensity at 8 o'clock, if you show up on Monday and there's a 1 hour task on your calendar, you want to know with extreme clarity what you're going to do in that hour to make it happen. And people are like, oh, that's hard, or that feels like project management. But the reality is we're doing that real time. If you don't make a plan and you show up at 8 a.m. on Monday and just start working on a task, you're going to do the same exact thing. You're going to ask yourself, what should I do first? And what should I do second? I'm simply encouraging people to have a weekly ritual with yourself where you're doing that work ahead of time to really think through, okay, these things that I want to achieve that I've prioritized in a single list, how am I actually going to get that work done? Once you have that list prioritized, you've broken them down to those actionable chunks. Your brain loves actionable chunks. Your brain will attack that list because it feels like it can check it off. I can get the dopamine hit. Instead of this unwieldy 50-hour project, I now have all of these little 1 to 4 hour tasks that become little mile markers in the marathon to get me across the finish line. Our brain loves that type of dopamine hit to make progress. So now, if you think about where we are, Flavia, we've decided how much we're going to work this week. We have a list of all of our priorities prioritized. We've broken them down to 1 to 4 hour tasks. Now we're going to go into our calendar. We're going to map in those items into our calendar because our calendar is the representation of that currency. Our calendar literally shows us the currency we have next week. We line out the 50 hours. These are when the 50 hours hit next week. And now we're simply going to fill in these calendar blocked items. Now, a really critical step before you do that is 2 things. One, you need to put in any personal commitments you have that are going to compete with that time. Maybe doctor's appointments or time with your kids or time with a spouse or coffee with a friend, or you need to pick up your dry clean, whatever it is. If it's going to pull from that time, you need to map that out. Because the reality is it does pull from that time. Again, we're honoring the fact that we are finite human beings with only so much time currency. And we're showing the fact that that time currency is already spent on some of these personal items. The other thing we need to do, and this is where most people fall down with calendar blocking, is they don't block in buffer time. I call it whirlwind in the time boss model. And my recommendation is that people block 20 to 40% of their day for whirlwind. And that's going to sound like a lot, but people fight me on it often. But as they get into it, they realize it's real. And buffer is for email, Slack, Teams, client called, a last second thing came up. My kids came in and they're sick. My water heater breaks. It's just the way that we deal with reality. We're just planning for reality on the front end. We're putting that in there. And the magic thing that Whirlwind does is it creates these lanes. We now have a lane where I'm going to deal with the chaos and reality of life. And we have the other lane where I'm going to deal with all my priorities that are in my list. And what that does is it gives our brain freedom to focus. If I know I have time every day set aside to deal with that last second request that came in and all the email in my inbox and all these messages lighting me up in Slack and Teams or whatever, all these text messages, I'm much more likely to focus the other hours because I know there'll be enough time for me to keep up with my commitments. And the magical thing, Flavia, that happens with Whirlwind is you don't actually need it every day. And so it's this virtual buffer you're building in to really set expectations about what's possible. But if you don't need it, and especially talking to the people that are listening to this podcast, entrepreneurs, contributors, people that want to make a difference, that care deeply about their contribution, if you don't need Whirlwind, it's bonus time. You can now go grab tomorrow's priorities and pull them into today. Or you can go back to your priority list and grab one of those items off your priority list that you didn't get a schedule and you can make that happen. And when we do that, instead of that terrible story we were telling ourselves before of I'm behind, there's not enough time, I'm a failure, we start telling ourselves a story of, holy smokes, I'm ahead of schedule. I can make this happen. There is enough time. And when we do that, we live with this expansive focus. The focus and freedom we bring to the tasks that end up on our calendar is just next level. Not only are we better living a more balanced life, being a time boss for our future self, deciding how much we're going to work, making sure there's enough time for the other areas of our life, but the items that stay on our calendar go next level. We bring our whole self to that work with intense focus. And instead of feeling like we're being pulled out of the moment by all the things we can't focus on, we're able to really focus in deeply. So Whirlwind is so critical. Last thing we do, I'll round it out quick, and I definitely want to get to your questions. You go back to your prioritized list. You've got a bunch of 1 to 4 hour tasks, and now you're just mapping them into your calendar. Your calendar is ready to roll. You've got buffer built in with Whirlwind, and now you're just mapping tasks into your calendar. And you now have a full calendar that has realistic buffer. It's prioritized. These are the right things in order for me to focus on based off what my priorities are. You've made a plan for reality. And what's going to happen in this process, Flavia, is you probably imagine, as you fill up your calendar, you're going to reach things that don't make it to your calendar for next week. And you feel the weight of those not being there. Again, that idea of children you're not feeding. And this is the task that people often don't take is you have to deal with the items that don't fit. You have to have a plan for them. And that may mean that you need to delegate them. You need to get someone else involved. You need to hire a contractor to do that work, or you need to ask a team member to do that work. That may mean you need to digitize them. You need to automate, or you need to ask ChatGPT to help you with that. That writing task I was going to take 2 hours on, I might do with ChatGPT in 20 minutes. You may need to just defer it. You may say, you know what? It won't break if I don't work on it this week. I'm going to leave it in this list that I've created until next week. And I'll run a weekly planning meeting again next week. And next week, I'm going to prioritize it in. But you just have to deal with those items. If you don't deal with those items, they become emotional anchors as you walk into your week. And again, they will drag you out of being fully present to the things that are in front of you. They will limit your impact on what you're able to accomplish. And so if you do all that, once you're done, the final step is just commit to the plan. You just did all the work. You were a time boss for your future self next week. The last step is to just commit to that. Like the president of the United States is inviting you to those items on your calendar. I have to show up. These things matter. I believe in my contribution. So at 8 a.m., when I come to my first 1 hour task that I schedule for myself, I'm going to hit that as hard as I can. And I'm going to protect my ability to focus, trusting that I'll have Whirlwind available to deal with anything else that's coming in. But I'm going to focus in and I'm going to make that thing happen. And that process right there, Flavia, changes people's worlds. If they get good at that, it fundamentally changes the way that they approach work. And they all in love with their contribution again without that feeling of anxiety and burnout that is constantly dragging, especially at entrepreneurs that are trying to make something happen. I will take a breath. I will pause. Thank you for listening to my presentation. I just wanted to get that
This
all
is,
of that out
I
for
love
you.
it. No, this is amazing. I hope the TED organization puts you on if you haven't already, because
Oh,
this
you're
is
so
such an
kind.
important conversation. It really is. And so many people want to be their own boss and they don't realize that part of being your own boss is you have to become your own time boss because you're your own
Yes,
project manager. Like you said, you're the
100%.
one deciding what to prioritize, what to spend time on, what needs to
Right,
get done, and how to do it.
right.
So
Yeah,
do
there's
you think
no,
go ahead. There's no?
oh, I was just gonna say our time management habits are often a function of industrial economy where there's a machine line, there's a widget we're stamping out at 5 o'clock, we go home. I can't do the widgets at home because the machine's at the office. And it's just not, that's not how the world works. Unless we apply mental models to protect ourselves, truly become our time boss, we will just feel the burn of work all the time. And I just think the mental models are so critical in this process.
So, do you do most of your work in consulting for companies, or do you also have a lot of clients who are individuals?
Yes, so we have both. So we have public groups where a group of 4 to 6 individuals go through this content together. It's a 6 week process. And then we also do that for teams. And it's really powerful for teams, as you can imagine, when you have shared language around whirlwinds, a weekly planning meeting. I call that priority list your backlog. When you have that shared language, it allows teams to go very fast and it creates this really powerful shared empathy around, okay, I know she did a weekly planning meeting. I know her week is full of the highest leverage priorities. So I need to be really respectful of Flavia's time if I come to ask for it. And I might say, hey, Flavia, in your whirlwind today, could you help me with this? Instead of, Flavia, please, can you help me? Can you help me? Can you help me? Can you help me? Where I know if I bug you, I'm dragging you out of the present moment. I'm adding an emotional weight that's pulling you out of the priorities you need to accomplish. So it's a very powerful process when a team adopts it together. And again, like I mentioned, I'm a fractional COO. This is how my teams run. And the companies I lead, the first thing I do is install this framework because I know it's going to get us the outcomes we want without anxiety and burnout being part of that equation.
Is there a generational difference or mindset? Because I'm also curious, and it may just be people of different ages. So, when you work with teams and there's different team members and they come from either a different generation or just different age group, different life experience, do you find that people of certain ages tend to see time management or burnout differently than others? Or is it pretty much the same across the board generationally?
Oh, no, your first insight's correct, Bob. It's very different generationally. So older individuals can just grind. They just have it in them. Younger individuals tend to be a little bit more, what's the word that I would say? They're a little bit more impacted by the burn of business. Like it's harder for them to grind. And some of that is just expectations. So you have older individuals who they just think work is number one on the totem pole. And these are broad generalizations, as you can imagine, but older individuals that think work is number one on the totem pole, and I'm just going to spend less time with my family or less time volunteering or less time in my community because work's number one priority. You have younger individuals who have a more integrated view of life where their community and their family is is critical to how they will define success for their life. And when work comes calling for 50 and 60 hours a week and they feel like they should be working 45 hours a week, you now have a 10 to 15-hour tension with individuals like that you just have to figure out a way to resolve. And so that's where that language of highest sustainable pace comes from for me. Again, I bear no judgment on the amount of time people work. What I'm most interested in is for the way that they define success in their life. How do we help them find the highest sustainable pace where they can deliver the contribution they want in all areas of their life? For me, I know it's about 50 hours that allows me to have my highest sustainable pace in work. And then these habits help me be fully present when I'm off work with my wife, with my kids, in my community, in my church, and the places that I want to show up. That's what it is for me. Some friends of mine can do 70, some friends of mine can do 35. But again, it's about each individual really holding firm the contribution and how they define success for their life and then figuring out how to structure their time to help get them that outcome. So it does vary per person, and it can be a bit generational to answer your question.
It's amazing. So, how do people learn more about Time Boss? And I know that you have offered a really nice free 90-minute masterclass that teaches the Time Boss framework to our listeners.
Yeah.
I've always encouraged all of our guests to, hey, what can you offer that would be free or no cost just to help the audience? And then we put all of those in our vault, our repository, which people can access at podcastguestgift.com, podcastguestgift.com.
Cool.
But how do people find you? And tell us a little bit about that 90-minute masterclass.
Yeah. So timeboss.us, if you look under the resources tab, you'll see we have all kinds of free resources, but the masterclass is great. I am such a believer. What I just shared with you really is the framework, about maybe 60, 70% of the framework. The masterclass will finish off the rest of it. So if you were interested in what you heard today, it is a hand-holding walkthrough of how to do this in your world. I am such a believer in information is free, and to warn everyone, implementation is hard. So if you do the masterclass, I just would encourage you to find accountability somewhere. Find someone that you're committed to really implement this in your world and help you get over the friction that is inevitable when you try to change your habits related to time. For those that want additional help, we do have cohorts, and we do also do one-on-one coaching to help people get over the hump and really solve this in their world. But timeboss.us is the best place to look to get started.
Andrew, thank you so much. It's always so great to talk to someone with a brain like yours, someone whose mindset is dialed in. And I love that you help people take back their time and also to avoid burnout, because we do have limited time. We have our lifetime. Like, we don't really know what happens after or before that, but we have limited time. And to spend any of that time in a burnout stage where your body's shutting down your sense of smell, or you have back pain, or all those things that we know can be caused by just pure stress, what you're doing is just such a service to humanity, to all of us. So thank you for all that you do. More specifically, thank you for being on the show today and sharing your expertise. It's been a great chat.
I loved it, Flavia. Thank you so much for having me. It was just an honor to be here. I really appreciate it.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you enjoyed the show. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast, and if you leave a review on iTunes, I promise I will read every single review. If you know someone who makes a full-time living from part-time work, and maybe this is you, please visit lifestylesolopreneur.com to nominate a guest or to nominate yourself. Because remember this, money doesn't buy happiness, but money in the hands of a happy person, there is no greater tool.
Today's episode was brought to you by the Get Shift Done program. It's a lifestyle-changing online class to help you define your business and lifestyle ambitions, and to set goals in a way you've never experienced before. This class will 10x your daily productivity with methods that will blow your mind. And if you use the coupon code podcast, the class tuition is 99% off. Visit GetShiftDone.com to enroll today.